But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it.
It is the show that people love to hate.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested hen house.
And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last weekend.
Yeah, they have nothing else to talk about. Maybe you should get the lawyer that worked on that Covington Catholic school case. What was that, a $200 million settlement?
It all exploded with a lawsuit so massive, it didn't just rattle The View. It sent shockwaves through the entire media world. Charlie Kirk wasn't playing games anymore. He dropped a thunderous $100 million lawsuit, and the entire daytime TV empire shook with fear. This wasn't some PR stunt or a dramatic headline meant to trend on Twitter. Kirk was done watching his students be dragged through the mud by smug TV hosts who thought they could say whatever they wanted and walk away without consequences. Kirk's Turning Point USA had hosted a huge youth summit. Over 5,000 students from across the country came together to hear conservative speakers.
The culture shift between right and left authoritarianism, and now people don't recognize that if you just stop looking at it in terms of red and blue, look at the actions, whether it's war, suppression of free speech, pharmacological interventions that are mandatory, whatever it is, that used to all be associated with the authoritative right, the authoritarian right, and now those things are being embraced by the left. And I just think it's just an ideology thing, and I think we get confused and we think we're on the right side, and if it's our side that's saying this, for sure that's the right thing to do, and no one's critically thinking about this.
Joe Rogan is the gateway drug for young men that thought they were Democrats to become MAGA. Joe Rogan is the bridge, and on that bridge they'll see RFK, they'll see Elon Musk.
These weren't criminals or extremists. They were teenagers, full of energy, flying in just to be part of something political and powerful. But what did The View do? They didn't report it. They smeared it. They tossed out wild claims, suggesting that Kirk's youth gathering had ties to dangerous groups. Imagine being 16 or 17 years old and hearing on national TV that your trip made you look like a criminal. And that's when Charlie Kirk said, "Enough." He may be used to being a target, but these weren't just random political attacks. They were branding innocent kids with accusations that could stick for life. He wasn't going to let it slide this time. Even worse, it took a legal threat for The View to even consider apologizing. Not regret, not reflection, just plain old-fashioned fear of getting sued. Kirk made it very clear. They didn't backtrack because they were sorry. They did it because they were scared. The moment Kirk was asked if he accepted the apology, he turned the spotlight back on the real victims. "It's not about me," he said. "The question is, do our students accept it?" And suddenly, the entire story shifted. This wasn't just about him. It was about justice for the next generation. The View had mocked people who believed different things, but now they were being exposed for who they really were, a group of smug, reckless hosts who would rather go viral than tell the truth. Kirk was coming for them with everything he had, and Joe Rogan was right behind him. That's when Joe Rogan kicked the door in and set the whole studio metaphorically on fire. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't play nice. He ripped into The View with raw honesty, calling them out for exactly what they had become.
Charlie Kirk's the founder and CEO of Turning Point USA and the author of the new book, The College Scam. So, Charlie, do you accept the View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis.
A chaotic mess of loud opinions and zero accountability. Rogan didn't just criticize the show, he shattered it with brutal accuracy. They always bring on one conservative woman just to yell at her, he said. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. From Meghan McCain to Survivor contestants, anyone who dared to disagree was silenced and mocked. But this time, it wasn't just about conservative guests being interrupted. It was about truth being trampled in the name of entertainment. And Rogan wasn't having it anymore. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Kirk. The clip in question? It wasn't Rogan claiming to believe in mythical beasts. It was a guest talking about ancient reptile sightings. But Sunny twisted that casual chat into a headline, and that's the exact kind of recklessness that gets people sued. Rogan shook his head in disbelief as he replayed the moment on his show. You didn't even listen to what was said, he exclaimed, and that was the real issue. Sunny wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in damage, and she did more than damage her own credibility. She handed Charlie Kirk a massive advantage in court. A lawyer on TV throwing around wild claims without evidence, that's a lawsuit waiting to explode. Then Rogan peeled back the curtain on something even more disturbing, the illusion behind the View's studio audience. He explained that most of those clapping, cheering, gasping reactions aren't genuine fans, they're hired seat fillers. That's right, paid to sit and react on cue. Rogan said it bluntly. The real fans of The View probably can't even leave the house anymore. And the laughter that followed wasn't just entertainment, it was a complete dismantling of the show's credibility. The View wasn't just out of touch, they were manufacturing applause while silencing real voices.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
Right. Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
I have no hate for Joy Behar. If I saw her, I'd give her a hug. I'd probably say the same thing about me if I was her. You're worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is fucking great, and Joe Rogan believes in dragons!
And Rogan wasn't afraid to point it out, again and again. He mocked the entire setup, calling it a performance pretending to be a conversation. But what hit hardest wasn't the jokes, it was the truth buried inside them. Rogan pointed to the growing divide between traditional media and independent voices. And he said what millions were already thinking. They don't control the narrative anymore. He explained how The View represents the old guard networks, filters, teleprompters, and gatekeepers. But the new wave, podcasts, grassroots voices, platforms that reach people directly. And that's why this moment mattered. This lawsuit wasn't just about Charlie Kirk or Joe Rogan. It was about the collapse of a system that thought it could say whatever it wanted without facing consequences. And now, That system was being dragged into the courtroom, kicking and screaming. Rogan didn't just destroy their logic, he exposed the hypocrisy that fuels their entire show. They talk about fairness, truth, and accountability, but they showed none of it when they targeted thousands of innocent students. He reminded everyone how these kids weren't political pawns. They were teenagers who gave up their summer to attend a conference. And now they were being smeared for it by people who claimed to protect the youth on TV. It was outrageous, and it was a line that had to be drawn. Kirk said it clearly, "This isn't just about me. This is about every one of those 5,000 students." And Rogan echoed that sentiment. This is about power and who gets to abuse it. They both made one thing clear. This case wasn't about silencing the media. It was about protecting the truth. Because when you lie about people on live television and you're backed by $1 billion network, there should be consequences. And this wasn't some slow drip scandal. This was a wildfire.
But with that show has this very specific ideological bubble in which they operate in, and they always bring on a token conservative woman and they yell over her and silence her. And, they did that with Meghan McCain, and they did that with what is that other blonde woman from Survivor? Do you remember her, Jamie? She was always yelling. I mean, it's a bizarre show. I think the way before you start, I think the way you described it is brilliant, and the way we should all look at it. Of course, you're going to see race. The idea of being colorblind is ridiculous, but treat everybody. They're just human beings. Yeah. Everybody's just individuals. That's a very strange show, but it's fun to watch. It's just fun to watch them.
It's good entertainment. Yeah. Undoubtedly.
Well, they're just, it's interesting because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured. Right. That's sort of, I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, who are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart, but captured.
Sure, I think she came into it with an agenda.
Of course. They do everything with an agenda.
Every time The View tried to walk back their comments, they only looked more guilty. Every apology sounded like a strategy session, not an act of remorse. The pressure was mounting, the cracks were showing, and viewers could see right through the forced smiles and uncomfortable jokes. Even loyal fans began to sense something had changed, and not for the better. Rogan's voice kept growing louder, not by shouting, but by saying what others were too afraid to say. "They created this mess," he said. "Now they want to pretend it didn't happen. But the lawsuit says otherwise." And the fear in the room was real, not just because of the $100 million price tag, but because of what it represented. A future where talk shows can no longer smear and slander with immunity. A future where truth gets its turn at the mic. Rogan wasn't just delivering commentary anymore, he was leading a reckoning. He turned The View's carelessness into a symbol of everything wrong with today's mainstream media. He asked the hard question everyone else ignored. Why are shows like this allowed to make wild accusations without a shred of evidence? And when no one had an answer, that silence said it all. Charlie Kirk's lawsuit became more than just a legal case. It became a message, a warning shot fired at every TV host who thinks a camera gives them the right to say anything without proof. And right in the middle of that firestorm stood Sunny Hostin, a lawyer, a prosecutor, someone who should know better. Now buried in backlash, she created herself with one careless segment.
Not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows. I don't know if you've ever seen audiences before for TV shows, but a lot of them are paid. They're paid to be there. So, because they have to guarantee that there's going to be people there. So there's services that you hire. And when a show gets really, really popular, like Letterman or something like that, obviously it has its own fan base. Right. And those people will try to get tickets before anybody else does. And in that case, they probably don't need to use a service anymore. They just get actual fans. But arguably, like, the real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point. Most of those people can't leave the house. Like, they're probably immobile.
Right.
Rogan hammered that point again and again, not to humiliate her, but to highlight just how far media had fallen from its responsibility to the truth. You're supposed to know the power of your words, he said, so why act like they don't matter? And now they were being forced to answer for it. Not on social media, not in the court of public opinion, but in an actual courtroom where the stakes are real and the truth matters. Rogan didn't let up. He exposed the game. This is what they do, he shouted. They dress up opinions as facts, throw accusations around like glitter, and hope nobody notices the mess they leave behind. But now, everyone was noticing. And Kirk's lawsuit had opened a door that might never close again. If he wins, this case could set a precedent. A legal reminder that defamation isn't free speech, and smearing people on air has a cost. Media outlets everywhere were watching with clenched jaws, because if The View loses this, it could be the start of a new era, where every word on live TV is one step away from a courtroom subpoena. And for the first time in a long time, the old media was scared, not of a politician, not of ratings drops, but of a generation rising up and saying, enough. They weren't going to take the lies and labels anymore. That's why Rogan's takedown mattered so much. It wasn't just funny, it was powerful. It reached people who had tuned out of the noise and brought them back with a reason to care again. He didn't just call out Sunny Hostin, he turned her into a cautionary tale. A once respected legal voice, now tangled in a scandal of her own making, all because she forgot that microphones amplify more than sound. They amplify responsibility. And The View, their brand of smug superiority, their scripted chaos, their echo chamber applause, it all started to crumble. Because the truth has a way of getting through, no matter how many times you try to laugh it off. Even those who once defended the show began asking real questions.
This is the most important part. This is right after she was saying, we are run by ABC News. You should trust us, not Joe Rogan, who believes in dragons. So she by saying we should trust them because they're double checked by ABC News, and then making the stupidest fucking statement. Like you didn't listen to what I said.
Yeah.
You didn't listen to what the wildlife biologist, and that's only a part of what he said.
I can't believe
the other
Joy
part of what he
Behar
said
didn't
was
wait.
there was something before that where he was explaining encounters with giant reptiles. And then there's also, listen,
It doesn't make sense to me that a middle-aged woman could be dumb.
when you're worried about losing your job and you're worried about podcasts taking over and who's the source of.
Why were they so quick to judge? Why did they target teenagers? Why did they mock instead of ask? And why were they only sorry when the lawyers got involved? Rogan didn't need a studio, a teleprompter, or a PR team. All he needed was a microphone and the guts to tell the truth. And with every word, he stripped away the illusion The View had carefully built for years. In the end, it wasn't just about Rogan, Kirk, or Hostin. It was about a system getting caught in its own web. A system that thought it could say anything, smear anyone, and move on like nothing happened. But not this time. This time, the target fought back. This time, the truth had a voice louder than the studio laughter. And this time, a $100 million lawsuit wasn't just a number. It was a battle cry for accountability. As the legal battle continues, one thing is certain. Daytime TV will never be the same again. The View is no longer just a talk show. It's now the face of a media war they never saw coming. And Joe Rogan, he didn't just destroy the narrative, he burned it to the ground and handed the ashes back with a smirk. Because when truth meets arrogance, the truth wins. And this time, It won loudly,